Hello everyone. My name is Walter, so I'm a final PhD student in computer science under Java and supervision. And this is my last chapter or my last piece, my thesis. The focus of this is we saw there is a need for more large-scale text collection with a related domain that can enable some NLP research. And this is a collaboration with a colleague from University of Edinburgh and also with Paolo and Q. So this is the outline we'll be discussing. Why a DLT specific corpus, why the motivation. For starters, the DLT industry, at least depending at which point in time you see it, so the volatility goes up and down, but you can say it's around 3 trillion market cap. And as the industry is growing, there's constantly new terms referring to new technologies emerging, such as stablecoin, AMMs, DEX, and in today's conversation, probably you hear all other even new terms that might not be part of the lexicon, but are part of, for example, new formulas incorporated to improve in the field. So, given that, there is not that much text resources within the DLT field because the majority of NLP tasks are related to price prediction and related to smart contracts. So that gives us an opportunity to create a multi-source data set that is collected from different sources and then can support, for example, the study of the emergence of technologies, market dynamics, and other NLP-related tasks. This corpus at a glance is composed of scientific literature, patents, and social media in 22.4 million documents. If you split and look at where the majority of the documents come from, it's from social media, but in terms of which one have more text, this is our patents and the scientific literature. So if we want to say in terms of number of tokens is roughly similar between patents and social media, and still with a considerable good number in scientific literature. In terms of how this corpus shows in growth over time, you see that there's first scientific literature, and then there is patents and some social media. Scientific literature starts very early on because those are the building blocks and foundations for the DLT field, such as in cryptography, in networks, and P2P, and all related topics that built and what the DLT domain will become. And then you can see more users appearing and discussing these topics after 2010, which is after Bitcoin's origin. Now, how this corpus that we built compares to considerably large corpus such as Refined Web or C4, which have been used for building a large language models such as the initial GPT-2 and all them. And those are more generic data sets that they've been composed by scraping all the data and all the web. And they are trillions of tokens. But despite being that amount of trillion of tokens, they do not have that much terminology related to the DLT field. So comparing, for example, the different subset of our corpus, you can see which one the corpus has more density or more information related to specific keywords, which is essential for language models to learn about this type of specific terminology and be used in downstream tasks. As part of this data set, and to demonstrate how it can be useful, we do an initial analysis of the different subsets versus market cap, where you can see when Bitcoin is released, the market 2008, our market cap is almost inexistent around the time, and that's also because there is not that much information or a tracker where we can find that information. But comparing market cap growth versus the different type of sources of data and information, you can see that the market cap actually almost matches social media, and which explains the speculative nature that cryptocurrencies tend to have and how people move along as the market grows. But at the same time, how scientific literature continue growing uh, and continue still being developed despite whatever the market might be going up or down. And patents, in a way, responds to it. So then one of the findings is that research leads market growth by 2 years. So that means that scientific publications influence. So all scientific publications put the foundations for the future market growth. And then when market leads, you can see that the correlation is actually confirmed. Another analysis that we do, given that we have all these data set for social media, and now we have a language model. So we fine tune a language model, and then with a label sentiment data set to try to understand how people react. What is the general sentiment? And one thing that we notice is that the community is overwhelmingly bullish, even during times of crypto winters, such as between 2018 and 2020. The majority of sentiment continue to be very bullish, or at least for the social media community of users. Now, some insights relevant, at least for this conversation, for this presentation in regards to XRP. We look at dimensions across all the different data sets to try to understand what is the engagement for all these communities. And we notice in the social media, this considerably dropped in user engagement is around the time when there was a SEC lawsuit related to Ripple, one of the main companies behind the XRP ledger. But on the other hand, the academic publication and patents, we see that they continue growing, unaffected by whatever regulations are happening around. Now, comparing the XRP with other cryptocurrencies, we notice, for example, that Bitcoin, the number of research and the number of patents, actually research is plateauing, and patents is actually going down because probably they don't see that much business opportunities to take advantage in that regard. So in the case of Ethereum, research is continually growing and patents seems to be plateauing, but as we saw before, research tends to lead patents before patents are developed, and that might be explained by all the DeFi research going into it. And the XRP, of course, I give you the mention to you. And then we also have Adera, which is relatively young compared to the other three players in this example, who seems to be very early stage, and their interest seems to be primarily in the academic realm, with barely many mentions in social media in comparison to XRP, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. So if we want to take some takeaways for XRP, given in the context of this corpus and the context of this conversation today, is that the SEC lawsuit considerably affected social media engagement, while R&D and development still continue. Another insight is that user sentiment in this, at least for what we see, does not mean that the technology is not good and the technology is not continuing development. And that research will continue going despite the preceding market growth. And then by the same time, on a positive note, we do notice the recovery of XRP with academic and patent activity. If we have to extrapolate from what I was showing to you, for example, taking terms like stablecoin, centralized exchange, and automated market makers, is that new technologies here follow a traditional technology transfer model, where first science develops some of the ideas, knowledge, on which patents get developed or get inspired by, and then the social media community get engaged at a later stage. Now, for at least also as part of this development, we develop a domain-adapted language model. So, given that we have this data set, we want to also demonstrate how having a corpus that is very domain-specific can build a language model that can be only for the DLT field. Now, for this, we use BERT architecture, because at least for the purpose of this paper, it's not the language model itself, but the DEX data set that we are providing. Then we benchmark it against some other existing models with the ledger part outperforming pair-based model burn and other general purpose models. And then at the same time, by outperforming some more scientific domain specific model like Cyber, which contains a considerably amount of blockchain and distributed ledger technology type content. Right. And then one interesting insight that we found is that given what we've seen, academic research establishes the foundations in the DLT field, which leads the market by 2 years. And then given that what academic research, so from the business community, we see that the patents and innovation responds to that and builds on it. And then given that patent innovation activity, then the community start adopting some of these technologies, and then they start speculating and engaging with those technologies. And that leads, of course, to future market growth via the community infusing with more funds into the market, and then those funds coming in terms of market growth, then they fund more academic research that then goes on support this virtuous cycle for the market. And then as a summary, the DLT-Corpus is 2.98 billion tokens. So a GPT model can be built out of this. So some general generative AI language model can be easily built, which could be very specific for the DLT domain. For now, we just focus on a different architecture. And then, of course, the findings I was telling you about, the importance of scientific research that can help in market growth. And then the XRP insights. And then the general insight of how the traditional technology transfer model falls in the DLT field. So the importance of science leading to patents and then the community development. And then, of course, the sentiment paradox that social media users, which can be used as a proxy for the community of crypto users, they are overwhelmingly bullish even during crypto winters or during bear markets. Right, and these are, just to conclude, these are the public releases of our corpus and the different shapes and formats, and then also the language models that we train and the code data set. The preprint, we are soon to release it in the next couple of weeks. So I don't know if you have any questions.